Chapter 26-27, Shifeng's Sword. Chapter 26-27, Shifeng's Sword. Upon seeing Shifeng charging toward the two distant behemoths, Crimson Star and Wildfighter turned pale. "He's insane." Crimson Star cursed when she saw that Shifeng had already gotten over 100 yards away. Immediately, she turned to the rest of the team and ordered, "Everyone, retreat together with floating light. Do not stop for anything. Retreat to Violet Light City. Wildfighter, hold the rear with me." "Got it." Wildfighter responded and unsheathed his weapon, a solemn expression appearing on his face. In this situation, Violet Sword's members could not help growing nervous. As for Sandstorm and the other members of Mythology spectating from a distance, their eyes nearly fell out of their sockets when they saw Shifeng's actions. That crazy black flame. He's actually charging to the two region chiefs. Sandstorm cursed. Then, he commanded hastily, "Hurry. Retreat quickly." As soon as Sandstorm finished speaking, Mythology's members, who had been preparing to retreat from the area already, picked up their pace with serious expressions. Black Flame truly is insane. He's actually planning to drag everyone down with him. Did Violet Sword's people not warn him about the region chiefs here? The tall, female guardian knight grumbled, similarly cursing at Shifeng as she jumped down from the tree she had been standing on. The region chiefs of the ancient secret land were considerably stronger than mythic monsters found in the outside world. In terms of strength and speed, they were at least 30% better. Trying to take on just one of these region chiefs with a 200-man, Tier 3 team was already an incredibly difficult task, incurring plenty of casualties. When coupled with the endless stream of other monsters that would continuously join in on the battle, any team that tried to challenge a region chief was doomed. However, what made the ancient secret land's region chiefs truly difficult to deal with wasn't their physical prowess but their massive perception range. When these region chiefs fought players, they could manipulate all the mana within a 5,000-yard radius, relying on this mana to detect all movements within range. One could say that, so long as there were players within a region chief's passive perception range of 500 yards or players fighting a region chief, then all players within a 5,000-yard radius of the region chief would become its targets. If players failed to kill the aggravated region chief, then they wouldn't be able to shake off its pursuit. This was also the reason why Mythology and Violet Sword had labeled the mythic bosses in the ancient secret land region chiefs. Normally, teams that accidentally came across a region chief were still fine. The majority of the team's members had a chance to escape with their lives. However, only annihilation awaited teams that came across two region chiefs simultaneously. Even before the female guardian knight finished speaking, Mythology's members had already turned tail and run. However, after everyone had taken just a few strides, the mana around them suddenly stirred. At the same time, they felt as if a pair of eyes were looking down on them. Obviously, the two region chiefs had already locked on to their life auras. "Damn it. Everyone, split up and retreat. Every survivor counts," Sandstorm yelled. When he looked at Shifeng's distant figure, he felt himself going crazy. For a moment, he even suspected that Shifeng had deliberately provoked the two region chiefs. Meanwhile, when Crimson Star and the others saw the two region chiefs suddenly stop fighting and rapidly head in their direction, their complexions darkened. If they could not put a 5,000-yard distance between themselves and the two bosses, they had no hope of escaping the battle at all. A 5,000-yard distance. Even Tier 3 experts like themselves would still take quite some time to cover 5,000 yards. To make matters worse, tools were ineffective inside the ancient secret land, so they couldn't teleport away or accelerate their retreat from the battlefield. "Crazy bastard. He's going to get us all killed." Floating Light, who was already retreating, cursed when he felt the two region chiefs locking on to his life aura. Although players wouldn't lose an entire level from dying inside the ancient secret land, the amount of EXP lost was still not a trivial matter. After all, at their level, just leveling up once took a lot of time. Hence, even a small percentage of their EXP equaled 1 or 2 days' worth of hard work. As Floating Light was leading the retreat of Violet Sword's members, he suddenly noticed something. Zero Wings and Azure's members were actually still standing in their original positions. It was as if they had not heard Crimson Star's orders at all. "What are they doing?" Are they planning to die with black flame? Floating Light was baffled as he looked at Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian. Setting the others aside, it was incredibly strange for Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian to defy Crimson Star. After all, the two of them were geniuses that had trained under Crimson Star during their sojourn at Violet Sword. The two of them knew very clearly how powerful and capable Crimson Star was. Crimson Star's calling for a retreat showed just how dangerous their current situation was, yet Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian had actually disobeyed her command and remained where they were. Moreover, they wore indescribably calm expressions, their reactions making it seem as if nothing was happening. Vice Commander, let's quickly retreat. This is Zero Wing and Azure's matter. Instructor Crimson Star and Instructor Wildfighter won't be able to hold off those two region chiefs for very long, a retreating Tier 3 assassin urged hurriedly when he noticed Floating Light pause. I guess you're right, Floating Light said, nodding before resuming his retreat. At the same time, he could not help glancing at Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian with pity. Originally, with Solitary Frost's and Yang Xiaoqian's talents, they should have been able to shine brightly in God's domain. However, their futures were now ruined because they belonged to a guild like the Azure Chamber of Commerce and followed an unreliable team leader like Shifeng. However, Floating Light had just taken a few steps forward when the deafening roar of a bear came from behind him and echoed throughout the forest, causing it to tremble. Immediately afterward, a beam of mana shot past the area beside Floating Light's group, leaving behind a massive trench on the ground it passed through. Seen from afar, the ground looked like pudding that a spoon had scraped. The fight started. Floating Light's complexion further darkened as he took in the massive trench a short distance away. This was the power of the ancient secret land's mythic monsters. Any random attack of theirs could transform the terrain around them. Let alone one person, even a 100-man, Tier 3 expert team would be cannon fodder in front of these region chiefs. If one really wished to take on a region chief, they would need a 200-man team of Tier 3 peak experts at the very minimum. Moreover, the team would need 2 or 3 domain realm MTS working together to tank the region chief. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stop the boss's attacks adequately. In fact, even a single mistake might result in a team wipe. After Floating Light's group ran for another 50 yards or so, a lightning bolt suddenly shot past them some distance away, followed by the ear-splitting crack of thunder. As the thunder faded, the sky above them darkened abruptly. In the next moment, the 200-meter-tall, six-eyed gorilla went flying overhead and crashed heavily into the ground a few hundred yards ahead of them, the ground shattering at the impact. As for the giant gorilla, it stumbled quite a bit as it landed and very nearly lost its footing. After stabilizing itself, the gorilla glared into the distance before releasing a deafening roar. It then charged forward, completely ignoring Floating Light and the other members of Violet Sword, who stood only a short distance away from it. What is going on? Floating Light was confounded by this situation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Violet Sword's other peak experts similarly could not help rubbing their eyes, thinking that they were hallucinating. However, no matter how much they rubbed, the several massive craters the six-eyed gorilla's feet left behind did not disappear. Before Floating Light and the others could react to this unexpected development, though, another deafening boom and the snapping of trees entered their ears. However, these sounds came from quite a distance away. There should still be some separation between the origin of these sounds and the six-eyed gorilla that had just charged past them. Floating Light and the others turn around reflexively, looking for the origin of these sounds. They spotted a cloaked man wielding 2 long swords standing atop a tree. Meanwhile, some distance away from this swordsman was a gigantic bear that had just steadied itself, glaring hatefully at him. The six-eyed gorilla was also stalking toward this man, seemingly searching for an opportunity to strike at him. However, Floating Light and the others could also see a hint of fear in the one-horned bear's and six-eyed gorilla's eyes. It was clear that the 2 region chiefs were afraid of the tiny human on the tree. Chapter 26-28, Suppressing the Region Chiefs. Chapter 26-28, Suppressing the Region Chiefs. Floating Light and the other members of Violet Light gaped in shock at the man standing atop the gigantic tree that was over 100 meters tall. Just how high is his strength? Those were two level 120+ region chief. Either of those region chiefs could wipe out a 200-man, Tier 3 team of peak experts. Facing both region chiefs, even a team of such caliber was sure to get annihilated. At this moment, however, Shifeng had single-handedly suppressed and even repelled the two region chiefs. This was simply unbelievable. Is this why they didn't retreat before? When Floating Light looked at the two region chiefs warily eyeing Shifeng and thought back to the fact that Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian had not moved even after Crimson Star gave the command to retreat, realization immediately dawned upon him. With such a monstrous team leader, there was indeed no need to retreat. At this moment, Floating Light and the other retreating members of Violet Sword weren't the only ones shocked by this situation. Crimson Star and Wildfighter, who were planning to hold the rear, as well as the frantically retreating members of Mythology, nearly had their eyes fall out of their sockets when this incredible scene played out before them. What did he do during this period? How did he raise his strength attribute to such an extent? Sandstorm's heart roiled with shock as he stared at Shifeng. During the fight at the Starlight Fortress, the strength Shifeng displayed was just close to reaching the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, he had relied on his fully unlocked mana body to do so. However, just how long had passed since that fight? In Sandstorm's opinion, even if Shifeng were incredibly lucky and obtained one or two pieces of epic equipment or gained some special encounters, he would be fortunate to match the strength of Tier 4 mythic monsters of the same level. At this moment, however, Shifeng's strength had actually grown to a level where he could overwhelm even the region chiefs of the ancient secret land. However, before anyone could snap out of their stupor, the two region chiefs took action once more. Firstly, the one-horned bear let loose an angry roar before slamming its front paws into the ground and shattering it. A twofold magic array then formed beneath Shifeng's feet, covering a 300-yard radius. Immediately afterward, thick, stone walls emerged, bordering the magic array and enveloping Shifeng completely. Tier 4 spell, Earth's Embrace. As the one-horned bear was taking action, the six-eyed gorilla leaped into the sky above Shifeng. The gorilla then summoned a crimson magic array with a 400-yard radius above the swordsman. Tier 4 spell, Fire Dragon's Descent. In the next moment, a fire dragon larger than the six-eyed gorilla and made entirely out of flames emerged from the magic array. It spread its wings as it descended toward Shifeng. Those two region chiefs actually know how to coordinate their spells. Crap. That's cheating. Shouldn't mythic bosses be upright and use spells in turns? Everyone was stunned when they saw the two region chiefs' coordinated assault. Coordinating skills and spells was an extremely common thing for players. However, this was the first time they had seen monsters, particularly Tier 4 bosses, do so. Hence, everyone could not help despairing at the sight. For Tier 3 players like themselves, just one Tier 4 spell was already plenty difficult to deal with. If not handled appropriately, the result would very likely be an instant team wipe. If they had to go up against two coordinated Tier 4 spells, even Tier 3 MTS with their life-saving skills activated would be killed instantly, unless they had invulnerability skills or spells. It's really over this time. Crimson Star shook her head and sighed when she saw the two coordinated Tier 4 spells. If it were her, she could defend against one Tier 4 spell using a Tier 3 curse. However, even she would be powerless against two Tier 4 AoE spells. This didn't mean that she had just one Tier 3 curse in her arsenal of spells. In fact, she had several. Currently, however, it was simply impossible for her, and most likely all magical class players in God's domain, to double-cast two Tier 3 curses. Ha ha ha. So what if you have amazing strength? Let's see how you deal with this. Sandstorm burst out in laughter when he saw the two region chiefs' coordinated assault on Shifeng. The swordsman's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. In fact, he felt powerless when he witnessed Shifeng's fearsome display, and it was definitely impossible for them to exact revenge on him this time. However, being able to see the two region chiefs killing Shifeng now wasn't a bad outcome, either. After all, he knew that, because of the demon god's curse, the swordsman would suffer triple the death penalty every time he died. Although they were currently inside the ancient secret land where the death penalty was not as stringent as that in the outside world, a triple death penalty would still deal Shifeng a heavy blow. However, while everyone was looking at the gigantic fire dragon descending toward Shifeng, the swordsman surprisingly maintained his composure. Moreover, aside from Shifeng, the spectating members of Zero Wing and Azure also remained indescribably calm in this situation. Finally, a chance. Solitary Frost muttered as he watched Shifeng closely, his eyes glittering with joy and excitement. At this moment, aside from Solitary Frost, everyone else from the Azure Chamber of Commerce also had excited expressions. What's wrong with them? Floating Light was perplexed as he looked at Solitary Frost and the others. Shifeng was about to die here, yet Solitary Frost and the others were actually feeling excited about it. Come. While Floating Light was fraught with confusion, Shifeng made his move. In the next moment, Shifeng sheathed Killing Ray and held the abyssal blade with both hands. He then jumped up from the treetop, propelling himself straight toward the descending fire dragon. He's going to resist the attack head-on? Floating Light could not help but disapprove of Shifeng's decision when he saw the swordsman heading for the fire dragon. A Tier 4 spell could exhibit much greater power than a mythic monster could with its physical body. This was especially true in the ancient Secret Lands environment. Due to the abundant mana here, skills and spells would exhibit much greater power than they normally could in the outside world. A Tier 4 spell cast by a mythic monster could instantly kill a Tier 3 metric tons who had a life-saving skill activated. Just as Shifeng was about to collide with the fire dragon, he suddenly raised the abyssal blade overhead and swung it at the fire dragon. Shatter! The phantom of a gigantic greatsword suddenly appeared in the sky, creating a pitch-black wall there as it slashed toward the descending fire dragon. First Sword, Light Shadow. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In the next moment, the pitch-black wall not only bisected the fire dragon but also continued extending toward the six-eyed gorilla hovering over 100 yards above the fire dragon. Upon seeing the approach of the pitch-black wall, the six-eyed gorilla panicked and instinctively tried to flee the area. However, the pitch-black wall extended far too rapidly. Even though the six-eyed gorilla flew as fast as it could, it still failed to outmaneuver the pitch-black wall and ended up getting one of its arms cut off. The six-eyed gorilla let loose an agonized shriek that echoed throughout the forest at the grievous injury. Shortly afterward, an arm the size of a mountain fell into the forest below. A massive crater formed around the arm from the force of the impact. As for the six-eyed gorilla, it plummeted to the ground and tumbled helplessly for some distance. Due to the loss of its arm, the gorilla's combat power also decreased significantly. Chapter 26-29, Ancient Secret Lands Power. Chapter 26-29, Ancient Secret Lands Power. How is this possible? That's a mythic monster we're talking about. How could a Tier 3 player like him break through its defensive threshold? Crimson Star and Wildfighter could not believe their eyes as they watched the tumbling six-eyed gorilla. Not only had Shifeng shattered a Tier 4 spell with a single move, but he had even used the same move to injure the six-eyed gorilla severely. On paper, the gorilla had only lost around 500,000 HP from the attack, which was nothing compared to its 2 billion HP, but in reality, his attack had caused far more damage than that. There were two general types of attacks in God's domain. The first type reduced the HP of the target, while the other weakened the target's defenses. In the case of the former, if the target's HP fell to 0, then they would die. In the case of the latter, if the target had its defenses destroyed, then its physical body would suffer damage, which would, in turn, reduce the target's combat power, as well as the difficulty of killing said target. Only, it was incredibly difficult for players to execute attacks capable of destroying a monster's defenses, particularly those of high-ranking monsters, as the stronger a monster was, the higher its defensive threshold would be. Normally, players couldn't destroy the defenses of a monster of the same tier, much less those of a higher tier. The best players could do against higher-tiered monsters was cause minor injuries and continuously stack these minor injuries to reduce the monster's combat power. Against the six-eyed gorilla, only an attack carrying power at the peak Tier 4 standard had a chance of overwhelming its defensive threshold. However, despite being a Tier 3 player, Shifeng had actually managed this feat without resorting to external tools. This was inconceivable. Meanwhile, when Sandstorm and the other members of Mythology saw this scene, they, too, gaped in shock. Can he still be considered a player? There were no words to describe the shock Sandstorm felt as he gazed at Shifeng right now. In the eyes of ordinary players, having the ability to surpass a monster's defensive threshold only meant that they could reduce the combat power of the target monster. However, for peak experts and apex experts, who frequently fought high-tiered monsters, having such an ability held an entirely different meaning. For peak experts and apex experts, having such an ability meant that they could solo kill monsters. The monsters in God's domain were born with high HP and defense, particularly HP. Even if players could inflict over 1 million damage with their attacks, this amount of damage was nothing for high-tiered monsters like mythic monsters. Such damage wouldn't overcome the monster's battle recovery. An army of players was necessary to kill high-tiered monsters. Hence, in God's domain, it was common knowledge that even if a player's raw power surpassed that of high-tiered monsters, solo killing these monsters would still be impossible, especially Grand Lords or higher-ranked monsters. This held true even for current Tier 3 players. However, there was one method that players could use to defeat such high-tiered monsters: executing attacks surpassing the target monster's defensive threshold. Attacks that surpassed a monster's defensive threshold could inflict severe injuries on the monster's physical body. Moreover, after injuring a monster up to a certain point, aside from reducing the monster's combat power, players could also force monsters into a weakened state, which would drastically reduce their defense and maximum HP. If players managed to corner a monster to the point where it entered a heavily weakened state, they could even impose the HP loss debuff on the target monster and thoroughly nullify the monster's battle recovery. If a monster lost its battle recovery, which was also its strongest ability, solo killing it would no longer be impossible. With sufficient stamina and concentration, players could slowly but surely grind the monster to death. Now that Shifeng was capable of surpassing the six-eyed gorilla's defensive threshold, this meant that Shifeng could solo kill it. Meanwhile, a player having the ability to solo kill a Tier 4 mythic monster was simply unheard of in God's domain. At this moment, however, let alone the spectating players, even Shifeng himself found this situation astonishing. Why did Light Shadow's destructive power increase by so much? Shifeng was confused as he looked at the six-eyed gorilla's severed arm. Judging by the damage to its HP, my attack's raw power should still be far from the peak Tier 4 standard. Light Shadow should be just slightly stronger than a Tier 4 spell, yet the actual destruction it caused is no different from that of a peak Tier 4 attack. Could this be due to the ancient Secret Lands environment? Meanwhile, as Shifeng was analyzing the situation, the one-horned bear rushed toward him. The bear's gigantic frame made it seem as if a small mountain was charging at him. In fact, there was even the vague image of a mountain overlapping with the one-horned bear's figure. Tier 4 skill, Crumbling Mountain. The AoE of the one-horned bear's attack covered a 50-yard radius. Shifeng responded by raising the abyssal blade above his head once more. Light Shadow. When using Light Shadow this time, however, Shifeng placed the majority of his focus on perceiving the mana around himself. He wanted to see just what was enabling his mana technique to exhibit such immense power. When Shifeng started swinging the abyssal blade, another pitch-black wall formed on the battlefield, shattered the Phantom Mountain, and subsequently landed on the one-horned bear's left shoulder. Roar. When the pitch-black wall cut into the one-horned bear's shoulder, the bear let loose an agonized howl. Its HP also instantly fell by more than 620,000. Although Shifeng's attack this time did not sever the one-horned bear's left arm, it prevented the bear from freely moving its injured arm. Now, the bear could rely on only its 2 legs and 1 arm to stabilize itself. After suffering this grievous injury, the one-horned bear continuously growled at Shifeng angrily. However, fear was also clear in the bear's eyes. Upon seeing this scene, Floating Light and those of Violet Sword who were retreating were dumbfounded once more. How is this possible? That move just now wasn't a skill? Floating Light felt as if his worldview had been refreshed when he saw the one-horned bear daunted by Shifeng. In Floating Light's opinion, the attack Shifeng used to injure the six-eyed gorilla heavily should be a special skill. Otherwise, there was no way the attack could be so powerful. However, only 2 or 3 seconds after Shifeng retaliated against the six-eyed gorilla, the swordsman was using the same move against the one-horned bear. There was no way such a powerful skill could have such a brief cooldown. The only explanation for this situation was that Shifeng wasn't using a skill or spell, but a special technique instead. By simply relying on a special technique, Shifeng was actually capable of heavily injuring mythic monsters. Moreover, these mythic monsters were even the ancient Secret Lands region chiefs. Nobody would believe Floating Light if he told this tale to others. After repelling the one-horned bear, Shifeng himself was stunned as well. So, this is the reason why the ancient Secret Land can help players reach Tier 4? Shifeng thought as he looked at the closing spatial tear before him. In God's domain, the greatest difference separating Tier 3 and Tier 4 players wasn't the difference in physique, but the degree of control they had over mana and their application of it. To be precise, it was the degree of control over and application of ambient mana. Controlling and utilizing ambient mana might be something players had started doing since the start of the game, but the standard at which Tier 0 players did it was only at the most basic level. Their efficiency in utilizing mana was extremely low. Hence, players needed to rely on the mana of their fully unlocked mana bodies to guide and utilize the ambient mana for their own use. To put it simply, players had to rely on their own mana bodies to integrate and convert ambient mana into their own mana. By doing so, one would be able to maximize the power they could exhibit with their mana. However, integrating ambient mana was a challenge. Without guidelines or legacies in the outside world to teach players how to accomplish this, players could only rely on themselves to learn how to do so. However, while carefully observing the second light shadow he executed, Shifeng noticed something peculiar about the mana around him. The ancient Secret Lands ambient mana had actually taken the initiative to integrate itself with his mana. This development had drastically increased the amount of ambient mana he could manipulate and, in turn, boosted the power of Light Shadow significantly. However, as he wasn't actively executing this mana integration, his mana usage efficiency was still very low. The additional ambient mana he managed to manipulate had increased only Light Shadow's destructive power, not the mana technique's strength. This was akin to putting an edge on a weapon. While he might have increased the weapon's destructive power, the weapon itself remained unchanged. Even so, this was an incredibly precious situation. After all, there was almost no information available in the outside world that could help players achieve mana integration. Now that the mana here was actively integrating itself with his mana, he could gain some hints on how to do so and increase his learning efficiency. Following which, Shifeng stopped dwelling on this matter. Instead, he executed Light Shadow 2 more times to chop off one leg each from the one-horned bear and six-eyed gorilla. The mobility of these two region chiefs has already been greatly reduced. Let's go, Shifeng said as he turned to Crimson Star and Wildfighter, who were still in a daze. After saying so, Shifeng promptly ran toward the ancient city, ignoring the two region chiefs. He got through, just like that. Crimson Star and Wildfighter were at a loss for words when they goggled at the two region chiefs, which were warily watching Shifeng leave without making a move. They were currently inside the extremely dangerous ancient Secret Land, and their opponents were even two region chiefs, and yet. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, Crimson Star and Wildfighter did not linger over this topic for long. They quickly instructed everyone else on the team to ignore the two region chiefs and follow Shifeng. Now that the two region chiefs had each lost a leg, their mobility was greatly impeded compared to before. It would be almost impossible for them to catch up with Tier 3 players running at full speed. The team could easily escape the two region chiefs' perception range before they fully recovered. Team leader, are we still chasing them? A Tier 3 ranger from Mythology asked Sandstorm when he saw Shifeng's team leaving. Of course, we are, Sandstorm said as he glared at the Tier 3 ranger. Gritting his teeth, he said, I admit that Black Flame's combat power is at inhuman levels, but he is only one person. Even if we can't kill Black Flame, I refuse to believe that we can't handle the other players on his team. So long as we get rid of everyone else, Black Flame's plans here will be ruined. After saying so, Sandstorm started chasing Shifeng's team, together with the other 30+ members of Mythology. Chapter 2630, Tier 4 Divine Will. Chapter 2630, Tier 4 Divine Will. While the ancient secret land might be known as a secret land, it was several times larger than a large-scale map in the outside world, essentially a miniature world. Even though Shifeng and the others were Tier 3 players, since they were prohibited from using mounts, they ended up running for more than half a day to reach a majestic city in the middle of a canyon. The city in question had several layers of magic barriers as defense. Through the translucent barriers, one could see multiple magic towers and buildings several hundred meters tall. There were even floating buildings that could not be found in any of the kingdoms and empires on the main continent. This city was far more developed than even the capitals of kingdoms and empires. Shifeng was shocked when he laid eyes on this majestic ancient city for the first time. Even while standing several thousand yards away from the city, he could already feel a frightening pressure constantly bearing down on his body, making his body indescribably heavy. If Tier 2 players were subjected to this pressure, they wouldn't be able to approach the city at all. Be careful of those statues erected behind the city walls. Although there are magic arrays suppressing the power of those statues, if you look at them for too long, you'll fall into a mentally weakened state, Crimson Star warned the curious crowd behind her. If that happens, you'll need 4 or 5 days to recover. Let alone challenging the trial, you might not even have enough time to make it out of the secret land. Those statues will cause players to fall into a mentally weakened state. Upon hearing Crimson Star's words, Shifeng could not help taking a closer look at the stone statues enveloped by magic arrays. As soon as he did so, he felt a frightening spiritual pressure invading his mind. At the same time, the figure of an ancient being appeared briefly before his mind's eye. Shifeng's heart palpitated from this mental pressure. Fortunately, his mind was able to resist it, if just barely. Tier 4 Divine Will. Shifeng was somewhat surprised at the mental pressure the statues were exuding. No wonder Violet Sword was able to produce so many Tier 4 experts back then. At this point, ancient gods had long since withdrawn from the main continent of God's domain. Now, it was incredibly difficult to meet even demigods there. However, before disappearing, many ancient gods had left behind legacies in dangerous locations. Meanwhile, these legacy locations generally possessed divine will. On the surface, the divine wills in these legacy locations functioned to inflict powerful mental pressure on trespassers and deter casual approach or observation of the legacy locations. However, divine will also had a very useful function for players: the tempering of concentration. In God's domain, players' stamina and concentration were considered hidden attributes and were incredibly difficult to raise. This was especially true for the concentration attribute. Aside from tier promotions, there were no clear methods that players could use to raise their concentration. Originally, concentration was an attribute few players paid attention to, as they would generally run out of stamina before they would concentration. However, as more and more players started learning combat techniques, everyone finally understood the importance of concentration. With stronger concentration, not only could players afford to execute many more combat techniques, but they could also reduce the stamina and concentration consumption of combat techniques. Most importantly, powerful combat techniques required sufficiently high concentration. Unfortunately, there weren't many known methods that players could use to reliably increase their concentration. Generally, players could only rely on raising their tiers or improving their brain activity to do so. However, as more and more experts came into contact with ancient locations and divine will, they had discovered an astonishing matter: divine will could actually be used to raise the maximum limit of players' concentration. Although the improvements were small, players would eventually receive an impressive boost to their concentration over time. However, divine will wasn't something that easily found. Moreover, divine will couldn't improve a player's concentration in perpetuity. The improvements players could receive from the divine will would differ depending on its strength. If players already possessed very powerful concentration, certain divine wills might not even be effective on them. Meanwhile, the statues erected within the ancient city contained divine will capable of tempering players' concentration up to the Tier 4 standard, hence, Shifeng had referred to it as Tier 4 divine will. If a Tier 3 player could elevate their concentration to the Tier 4 standard, it would be of tremendous help when challenging the Tier 4 promotion quest. With stronger concentration, players could better control their body, strength, and mana. They would be able to exhibit much greater potential than they used to. However, due to the magic arrays enveloping those statues, the divine will the statues emitted was heavily suppressed. While this weakened divine will might be effective on ordinary Tier 3 players, it would be almost no help to Tier 3 peak experts. Tier 3 peak experts that tried to temper themselves using this divine will would only exhaust their concentration to no avail. Guild leader Black Flame, ahead of us is the entrance to the trial grounds, Crimson Star said as she pointed at a gigantic gate nearby. As we are challenging the hero trial, we have only one opportunity. If we team wipe inside, we won't be able to enter the trial grounds anymore. However, so long as we have even one person alive, even if everyone else on the team dies, we can still enter the trial grounds after getting automatically resurrected outside. Only, the resurrection period within the ancient secret land is very long, 1 full day, so everyone needs to be careful while inside. It might be fine if they were challenging the normal trial, but they had only one opportunity to challenge the hero trial. If the players on their team kept dying, they definitely wouldn't be able to clear the hero trial before the effects of their alchemy arrays ran out. Hence, when challenging the hero trial, controlling the casualty rate was crucial. This was also the reason why she wanted to avoid the region chiefs. Had their team gotten annihilated by the 2 region chiefs back then, they would have had to wait 1 full day before they could head to the trial grounds. I understand, Shifeng said, nodding. Since Shifeng already understood her intentions, Crimson Star did not say anything more. After all, experts of Shifeng's caliber generally needed only small reminders to know what they should do. Following which, Crimson Star, Wildfighter, and several other Violet Sword members approached the 10-meter-tall teleportation gate. Each of them then took out an ink-black crystal from their bags and started chanting an incantation. As soon as these dozen or so players started chanting, the divine runes engraved on the teleportation gate lit up and drew the ambient mana toward the teleportation gate. While Crimson Star and the others were activating the hero trial, Sandstorm and Mythology's other members were quietly observing the situation from behind a pile of shattered rocks 500 yards away. The hero trial, the female guardian knight standing beside Sandstorm exclaimed in surprise when she identified the divine runes lighting up on the teleportation gate. Violet Sword actually plans to challenge the hero trial now? Are they insane? She had experienced the ancient city's trials herself. While she didn't know what the hero trial was like, she knew that even the elite trial was not something current players could hope to conquer. If not for their previous raid team having plenty of advanced battle arrays, they wouldn't have made it to the trial boss's feat. As for the more difficult hero trial, that was something even the current mythology didn't dare dream of challenging. The hero trial? When Sandstorm saw Crimson Star's group activating the hero trial, a wide smile bloomed on his face. Good. Wonderful. Although I don't know what gave Violet Swords and Zero Wings people the courage to challenge the hero trial, this is our chance. Since Crimson Star and Wildfighter are personally activating the hero trial, they can't stop midway without wasting their one chance. This is the perfect time for us to take action. But dealing with Black Flame won't be easy, the female guardian knight argued worriedly as she eyed Shifeng, who was standing beside the teleportation gate. With him around, it'll be difficult for us to gain any advantage. Relax. The vice commander prepared a trump card for our operation this time, Sandstorm said, grinning. He then took out several gleaming gemstones from his bag. These are Tier 3 magic devouring gemstones, which the vice commander obtained from the demon god's shrine. If we equip them on level 100 dark gold weapons or above, we can sacrifice the weapon and the gemstone to gain Tier 4 power for a short period. This item isn't subject to any restrictions inside the ancient secret land. The vice commander gave me 5 of these as a precaution. So long as we 5 team leaders use this gemstone, we'll have 5 Tier 4 combatants on our side. Including the HP and defense we'll gain from the advanced battle array, we should be able to pin down Black Flame with just 3 people. The remaining 2 team leaders will lead the rest to slaughter Violet Swords and Zero Wings members. All their efforts will go down the drain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. If you had such treasures on you, why didn't you take them out earlier? The female guardian knight grumbled as she rolled her eyes at Sandstorm. Previously, the task their vice commander gave them was for them to spoil Violet Sword's plan, as well as kill Shifeng if possible. With the magic-devouring gemstones, while they might not be capable of killing Shifeng, spoiling Violet Sword's plan would be child's play. After all, players that died in the ancient secret land needed to wait one full day to get resurrected. If they could kill a significant number of Violet Swords and Zero Wings members, the two guilds would waste one day of the alchemy array's operational time, which would, in turn, drastically reduce the two guilds' odds of clearing the hero trial. And if they could interrupt the activation of the teleportation gate, they would thoroughly shatter Violet Sword's plan of raiding the hero trial. "All right, one for each of you," Sandstorm said as he distributed the magic-devouring gemstones to the 4 other team leaders on the team. He then looked toward Shifeng and said, "It's time we let Black Flame know how foolish it is to offend mythology." Chapter 2631, Yang Xiaoqian Taking Action? Chapter 2631, Yang Xiaoqian Taking Action? As Crimson Star and the others chanted their incantation, a spatial tunnel gradually opened in the teleportation gate. The moment the spatial tunnel appeared, everyone present felt an ancient aura spilling out from it as if a dragon from the abyss had just awakened. An unprecedented pressure bore down on their bodies. "So, this is the hero trial?" Shifeng was inwardly astonished when he felt the pressure on his body. The strength of this aura practically rivals that of a demigod. Even Tier 3 experts will most likely have difficulty exhibiting combat power at the Tier 2 standard while inside. While the pressure an aura subjected players to was not fatal, it would affect their combat power. At this moment, the aura leaking out of the spatial passage was so powerful that it made even Shifeng feel very uncomfortable. If other Tier 3 players were to fight while subjected to this aura, their combat power would definitely suffer. There are still 40 seconds left until the teleportation gate is fully activated. A mana shockwave will occur when that happens. "Floating light, start constructing a barrier," Crimson Star said through the team chat when she saw the spatial passage stabilizing. "Understood." Upon hearing Crimson Star's command, Floating Light promptly ordered Violet Sword's Tier 3 magical classes to construct a Tier 3 defensive barrier. While a mana shockwave wouldn't cause direct damage, players that got hit by one would have their control over and perception of mana weakened significantly for a certain period. Players might even lose the ability to use skills and spells during this time. On Violet Sword's first attempt at the normal trial, the raid team dispatched had failed to take this mana shockwave into account. As a result, the raid team had suffered from a runaway mana state for one whole day. However, as Violet Sword's members were constructing the defensive barrier, a low shout came from a distance. "A chance! Everyone, attack! Interrupt the teleportation gate's activation," Sandstorm commanded when he saw Floating Light and the magical class players of Violet Sword constructing a magic barrier. Immediately, several figures charged toward Crimson Star's group with flying speeds. The Silver Light Legion? Crimson Star immediately recognized Sandstorm's group when she saw them, her complexion darkening slightly. Sandstorm. Is mythology trying to break the agreement? If their team had come across Sandstorm's group under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have paid mythology's members any attention at all. However, Violet Sword's peak experts were currently occupied with activating the teleportation gate and defending against the resulting mana shockwave. They barely had any manpower available to repulse Sandstorm's group. Meanwhile, Sandstorm's team consisted of Void Realm experts or better. If these people attacked now, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, Sandstorm and the others had their advanced battle arrays activated, which boosted their basic attributes far beyond those of ordinary Tier 3 players. Agreement. Sandstorm laughed at Crimson Star's words. "I don't recall mythology making any agreements with Violet Sword regarding what happens inside the ancient secret land. Besides, if you have to blame someone, blame yourselves for not knowing what's good for you. Since you dare to partner with Zero Wing, then die with it." Sandstorm's team accelerated. "Damn it. They're actually taking action." Crimson Star turned to Floating Light and said, "Light, coordinate with Guild Leader Black Flame's group and buy us time. If the teleportation gate's activation is interrupted, we'll lose our chance to challenge the hero trial." "Understood." Floating Light nodded in response. He then faced Sandstorm's team with a solemn expression. Although their side had an absolute advantage in numbers and they even had the help of a monster like Shifeng, the number of combat-ready peak experts they had was far from comparable. Not to mention, Sandstorm and a few other individuals on his team had an advanced battle array, which granted them a huge increase in basic attributes. If they allowed Sandstorm's team to break through and interrupt Crimson Star's group, then all their preparations for the hero trial would be for naught. You need to be careful. I don't know why, but Sandstorm and his fellow team leaders are actually giving off a pressure like a mythic monsters. Do not clash with them directly, no matter what. Wildfighter reminded, a serious expression similarly appearing on his face. All you need to do is buy time. So long as you can hold them back for 40 seconds or so, we'll be free and can deal with them together. At this time, however, Shifeng suddenly said, that won't be necessary. Just leave these people to us. Focus on activating the teleportation gate and defending against what comes after. Guild leader Black Flame, we do not doubt your strength, but we really cannot take this risk. The members of Mythology's Silver Light Legion are all supported by a battle array. Their peak experts can hold their own against domain realm experts. Not to mention, Sandstorm and his fellow team leaders are at the half-step domain realm, at the very least. The few of them also possess some kind of strange strength. They aren't a force that an ordinary team of peak experts can hope to handle, Crimson Star advised hurriedly when she saw Shifeng dissuading them from taking part in the battle. Although Floating Light's group only has a few members, every one of them is a peak expert. They can be of some help to you. She was confident that Shifeng would emerge victorious in a fight with Sandstorm's group. However, their problem right now wasn't whether they could defeat Sandstorm's group but whether they could prevent Sandstorm's group from interrupting the teleportation gate's activation. After all was said and done, Shifeng was only one person. Since Sandstorm's team had 30 players, how many could Shifeng possibly hold back by himself? Wildfighter also nodded in agreement with Crimson Star's words. He felt that Shifeng was being perverse about keeping up appearances. Don't misunderstand. We are fully capable of stopping this level of combat power. If you still feel uneasy, I won't object to you joining the battle, Shifeng said, chuckling at the anxious expressions on Crimson Star's and Wildfighter's faces. Although Shifeng did not speak that loudly, everyone present was a Tier 3 expert with extraordinary senses. Hence, even Sandstorm's group, which was still several hundred yards away, heard him clearly. Stop us. Sandstorm laughed at Shifeng's words, a cold glint appearing in his eyes. Let's see how you'll stop us, then. You guys, take action. As soon as Sandstorm finished speaking, 6 level 113 and higher assassins suddenly appeared within 50 yards of Crimson Star's group. The masked man at the head of the assassins radiated an aura rivaling that of mythic monsters. This lead assassin moved so quickly that he appeared within 30 yards of Crimson Star in just the blink of an eye. The assassin then unsheathed his daggers and sent several dozen arcs of light tearing through space toward Crimson Star and the dozen or so other players activating the teleportation gate. What? Some of them actually snuck over already? Floating Light's complexion paled upon seeing these 6 assassins. It was simply impossible for them to stop such a sudden and widespread attack. Even Shifeng would most likely be able to stop only a portion of these attacks. After all, Crimson Star and the others activating the teleportation gate stood a distance from each other. It was impossible for a melee player like Shifeng to cover all that ground simultaneously. Just when the several dozen arcs of light were about to land on Crimson Star and the others, however, ice walls started appearing out of thin air one after another, separating Crimson Star's group from the light arcs. Meanwhile, when these powerful light arcs, which were capable of tearing apart even space itself, landed on the ice walls, it was as if they had crashed into an impenetrable wall. Not only did the ice walls stop the advance of these light arcs, but they even deflected the attacks to a certain extent. In the end, not even one of the several dozen light arcs managed to land on their target. Impossible. My attack actually got deflected by a bunch of Tier 2 ice walls? The eyes of the level 114, Tier 4 assassin in the lead nearly fell out of their sockets when he saw this scene. Currently, thanks to the magic devouring gemstone, His Tier 3 skill already carried power at the Tier 4 standard, something a few measly Tier 2 ice walls couldn't hope to deflect. In fact, the Tier 2 ice walls shouldn't even be capable of affecting his attack at all. However, the impossible had actually happened. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU who took action. Sandstorm was likewise stunned by this scene. He then turned to Crimson Star and wondered, could it be her? At this moment, Sandstorm truly could not think of any elementalist, aside from Crimson Star, who could use Tier 2 ice walls to deflect Tier 4 attacks. On the other hand, Crimson Star was currently activating the teleportation gate. Logically, she shouldn't have any leeway to do anything else. Crimson Star herself was astonished by this situation. However, compared to a melee player like Sandstorm, she, as an elementalist, was much more sensitive to mana. Hence, she was able to trace the origin of the ice walls immediately. Xiaoqian. When Crimson Star turned to look at the origin of the ice walls, however, she was stunned when her gaze landed on Yang Xiaoqian. Currently, Ice-type mana swirled around Yang Xiaoqian, a testament to the activation of an Ice-type spell. Since when was she this strong? Chapter 2632, Silenced Battlefield. Chapter 2632, Silenced Battlefield. Upon seeing Yang Xiaoqian take action, Violet Sword's members fell silent. Yang Xiaoqian had attracted a lot of attention when she participated in the training for young talents in Violet Sword. One of the reasons for this was that she was only half a step away from entering the domain realm. The other reason was instructor Torre's willingness to teach her. Hence, most of Violet Sword's upper echelon and peak experts had done their research on her and knew what kind of strength she possessed. However, the current Yang Xiaoqian was like a completely different person from the one they knew. She had single-handedly stopped the attack of a peak expert whose basic attributes were at the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, this Tier 3 assassin expert was also clearly only half a step away from the domain realm. Of the Violet Sword members present, even domain realm experts like Crimson Star and Wildfighter might not be able to stop the assassin's attacks completely, yet Yang Xiaoqian had. Naturally, this surprised Violet Sword's members. Her mana body is fully unlocked. Wildfighter, who stood relatively close to Yang Xiaoqian, revealed astonishment on his face when he sensed intense mana fluctuations from her. Her mana body was only at a little more than 50% potential 3 days ago. What did Zero Wing do? Upon hearing Wildfighter's words, realization dawned upon the other Violet Sword members present, and every one of them stared at Yang Xiaoqian in even greater astonishment. This was especially true for Floating Light, who had trained under instructor Torre together with her. How is this possible? This is the mana body we are talking about. How can she fully unlock it in just 3 days? Floating Light's eyes widened in shock as he gaped at Yang Xiaoqian. For a moment, he felt as if he was looking at a stranger. When it came to talent in combat, he was superior to Yang Xiaoqian. In addition, after he had trained in the ancient Secret Land's special training ground, his combat power was now recognized as almost equal to Solitary Frost's. In theory, he should be far superior to Yang Xiaoqian. Now, however, it turned out that Yang Xiaoqian's combat power actually surpassed his by a large margin. However, before Violet Sword's members could react to this unexpected development, Mythology's lead assassin made another move. This time, though, he dashed forward at great speed instead of launching a ranged attack. In no time at all, the lead assassin arrived within 10 yards of Crimson Star's group, this situation causing the expressions of Crimson Star and the others to darken. The assassin class wasn't known for its ranged attacks, the class truly shone in close combat. This was especially true for the explosive power the class could exhibit at melee range. Moreover, with the agility of the assassin class, trying to pin one down using ranged spells was extremely difficult, all the more an assassin with Tier 4 basic attributes. That little girl's defensive measures might be brilliant, but at this distance, I want to see how she'll stop my attacks, the lead assassin said as he got within 5 yards of Wildfighter. Tier 3 skill, Absolute Shadow Assault. Immediately, the assassin's body split into multiple shadows to assail Wildfighter, these shadows causing the surrounding space to crack as they approached the berserker. These shadows were so powerful that even Guardian Knights and Shield Warriors would die instantly if struck, let alone a berserker like Wildfighter. It's over. Upon seeing the rapidly approaching shadows, Wildfighter involuntarily shut his eyes. As he was currently activating the teleportation gate, he couldn't afford to defend against the attack at all. Doing so would cancel the process. Moreover, even if he weren't occupied with the gate's activation, he still wouldn't be able to get away unscathed from such a powerful attack. After all, not only did these shadows carry power at the Tier 4 standard, but they were also strengthened by a basic combat technique. Just as the several shadows were about to devour Wildfighter, however, a figure suddenly descended from above and transformed into 4 identical copies of themselves, which then struck at the assaulting shadows. Peng! 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 The clangor of weapons repeatedly echoed throughout the area before the teleportation gate. Multiple cracks extending up to 30 yards away appeared on the ground. The frightening shockwaves resulting from the clashes almost toppled the nearby peak experts. When the dust settled, a male youth wielding a greatsword appeared, standing quietly before the lead assassin from mythology. Since the youth's HP bar remained full, it was obvious that he had successfully fended off the lead assassin's attack. Solitary Frost. Wildfighter could not help doubting his eyes when he saw the youth shielding him. Even in his peak state, Wildfighter doubted he could perfectly defend against the lead assassin's attack. However, not only did Solitary Frost remain unscathed after repelling the lead assassin's attack, but the youth had also kept Wildfighter from coming to harm. The combat power Solitary Frost had just displayed was completely different from what Wildfighter remembered. He fully unlocked his mana body as well. When Crimson Star saw that Solitary Frost was similarly exuding a frightening amount of mana from his body, astonishment and confusion appeared in her eyes. In the case of Yang Xiaoqian, Crimson Star still found it understandable for the girl to unlock her mana body to 100% potential in just 3 short days. After all, Yang Xiaoqian was a magical class player. She boasted far better mana control than melee experts like Solitary Frost. She had much better odds of unlocking the mana body. Now, however, Solitary Frost had actually fully unlocked his mana body too. Since when did unlocking the mana body become so easy? While Crimson Star stewed in shock and confusion, Mythology's assassin leader, whose attacks got thwarted twice in a row, was extremely depressed. First, it was Yang Xiaoqian. Now, it was Solitary Frost. He was clearly just one step away from foiling Violet Sword's plans, yet he got blocked time and again. Sandstorm, my side is in trouble. The kid I'm up against has already fully unlocked his mana body. His combat standard is also very high. He's not the slightest bit weaker than Wildfighter. If he focuses on deflecting my attacks, I don't think I can do anything to the casters within a short period. If Black Flame joins in on the fight, I'm afraid I won't even be able to escape, the lead assassin reported to Sandstorm through the team chat. Since the ambush has failed, retreat and regroup with us first. We'll focus on killing off as many of Zero Wings and Azure's members as possible, Sandstorm ordered, gritting his teeth when he saw Shifeng holding off the remaining 5 members of the assassin party. After saying so, Sandstorm hastened his footsteps. Previously, the main group of Mythology's team had deliberately exposed themselves to hold the attention of Shifeng and the other Zero Wing members with fully unlocked mana bodies so that the assassin party would succeed in its ambush. However, Azure turned out to have monsters with fully unlocked mana bodies as well. This unexpected development had thrown a wrench into Sandstorm's original plans. Everyone, charge. No need to hold back anymore. We'll get rid of them together with the assassin party. Sandstorm shouted as he pointed at Zero Wings members. Upon seeing Sandstorm's team rushing toward Zero Wings and Azure's members, Crimson Star and Wildfighter could not help growing anxious. Guild leader Blackflame, we must not let that Tier 3 assassin regroup with Sandstorm's group. Team leaders like him can enter a battle array with each other. If we let him regroup with the main team, those team leaders will become even stronger. Crimson Star warned when she saw Mythology's assassin leader retreating at flying speeds. Relax. Even if they regroup, they have no chance of victory, Shifeng assured her, smiling. Even after seeing Mythology's assassin party retreating, he showed no intention of giving chase. But, Crimson Star fell speechless when she saw Shifeng's nonchalant attitude toward Mythology. She knew that Zero Wing had sent over 100 experts with fully unlocked mana bodies this time. These experts undoubtedly possessed astonishing combat power. However, the 30-plus members of Mythology's Silver Light Legion were no pushovers, either. With the assistance of a battle array, even those that hadn't fully unlocked their mana bodies could still exhibit combat power rivaling that of experts with fully unlocked mana bodies. In addition, every one of Mythology's members present was a bona fide peak expert or better. If the two sides clashed with each other, Zero Wing definitely wouldn't have an easy time. Good. Flowing Shadows party is almost back. Everyone, get ready. It's time we let Zero Wing and Azure know the power of Mythology, Sandstorm said to the three other team leaders when he saw the assassin party within 100 yards of the main team. Leave it to us. Once we activate our battle array, even Black Flame shouldn't think of making short work of us, the female Guardian Knight standing beside Sandstorm said, nodding. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, just as Mythology's assassin party was about to rejoin Sandstorm's group, Chiffon glanced at Aqua Rose, who stood beside him. In response, Aqua Rose nodded and said calmly, everyone, no need to continue hiding. Let these people know our true power. As soon as Aqua Rose finished speaking, Zero Wing's members promptly removed their black cloaks. A tsunami of mana immediately flooded the area outside the ancient city. A powerful aura also swept across everyone on the battlefield, stopping Mythology's members in their tracks. And upon seeing the statistics of Zero Wing's members, Mythology's members could not help being dumbfounded. Currently, every Zero Wing member before them not only possessed a fully unlocked mana body but was also at level 117 or level 118. Zero Wing's melee players were especially eye-catching as every one of them actually boasted dark gold set equipment. Chapter 2633, Monsters. Chapter 2633, Monsters. Those levels. How is this possible? Are they monsters? At this moment, let alone Mythology's members, even Violet Sword's members were stunned to see the levels of Zero Wing's members. Currently, even the peak experts of the various superpowers had reached only level 113 or level 114. However, even the lowest leveled Zero Wing member present was at level 117, far ahead of the superpowers peak experts. Team leader Sandstorm, all of them have fully unlocked their mana bodies. Moreover, their equipment standards are quite high, especially for those melee players. I'm afraid we'll need a lot of time and resources to kill them. If Violet Sword's side manages to free up some manpower in the meantime, we'll be in danger, a Tier 3 berserker from Mythology warned Sandstorm as he looked at the 100-plus Zero Wing members before them. Although the team leaders on their team had all fully unlocked their mana bodies, no one else on the team had. They only had the assistance of a battle array. However, even if they possessed superior basic attributes to Zero Wing's members, they definitely wouldn't be superior by much, judging by the equipment standard of Zero Wing's members. If it came down to a fight, they wouldn't have much of an advantage even in a one-on-one fight. Not to mention, their team only had 30-odd members, whereas Zero Wing's side had more than 100 players. Overall, they were at a complete disadvantage. Damn it. You guys retreat. Sandstorm ordered, his complexion darkening as he gazed at Zero Wing's members. He then turned to the female Guardian Knight beside him and said, Feather, you and the other team leaders continue fighting. We'll kill as many as we can. Retreat as soon as Crimson Star's group finishes activating the teleportation gate. Got it, replied the female Guardian Knight named White Feather, unopposed to Sandstorm's decision. Team leaders like herself and Sandstorm currently possessed power at the Tier 4 standard. With the assistance of the battle array, their basic attributes were far superior to those of Zero Wing's members. Out of the Zero Wing members present, only Chiffon could actually put them in a bind. However, if the 5 of them split up and took action independently, they could slaughter quite a few of Zero Wing's members. Moreover, they had already used the precious magic devouring gemstones for the operation. If they still failed to produce any results, they would definitely be punished. Obedient to Sandstorm's command, everyone from Mythology, aside from the 5 team leaders, promptly turned around and fled. However, as soon as Mythology's members took flight, a clear and crisp voice entered everyone's ears. Don't even think of getting away so easily. In the next moment, a magic array rapidly spread out from beneath Zhao Yueru's feet, summoning a barrier of flames. Covering a 500-yard radius around Zhao Yueru, the barrier trapped all of Mythology's members within it. Bastard! Sandstorm bellowed in rage when he saw the barrier of flames rise. He immediately charged straight at Zhao Yueru, his movement speed astonishing Violet Sword's members. Sandstorm was at least twice as fast as the assassin leader that attacked Crimson Star's group earlier. In the blink of an eye, he appeared over 50 yards from his original location. Everyone, be careful. He's already capable of perfectly integrating advanced footwork into his movement skill. Do not clash with him directly. Wildfighter warned, a grim expression appearing on his face at Sandstorm's astonishing speed. Among the various types of combat techniques available, the most difficult type to integrate with skills and spells was footwork. Integrating footwork with a movement skill was especially challenging. Even in Violet Sword, only a few individuals were capable of this. Anyone who achieved this integration could freely weave their way through an army of tens of thousands. Not to mention, Sandstorm's basic attributes were currently at the Tier 4 standard. With the combination of his speed and strength, he was basically unstoppable. In just 3 seconds, Sandstorm penetrated Zero Wing's defensive line and arrived behind Zhao Yueru. He then executed a downward slash at the elementalist's back using the silver short sword he wielded. Die, you hindrance! Sandstorm bellowed. Immediately, mana gathered around his short sword and coalesced into a great sword that left a dark void in its wake. Just when the great sword was about to land on Zhao Yueru, however, a lithe figure suddenly appeared beside the elementalist and sent a sword light cutting at the great sword. Boom! A loud explosion shook the battlefield, and the space surrounding the point of collision shattered into oblivion. The resulting shockwave sent all the players within a 10-yard radius of the explosion's epicenter flying. Impossible! She blocked it. White Feather, who was watching from a distance, doubted her eyes when she saw Gentle Snow stopping Sandstorm's attack. Although Sandstorm was an assassin, he had been drastically strengthened by the magic-devouring gemstone and the advanced battle array. His current strength far exceeded that of ordinary mythic monsters of the same level. With the boost in power his Tier 3 skill provided, his attack should be capable of repulsing even bona fide mythic monsters. However, despite being merely a Tier 3 player, Gentle Snow had actually managed to receive the attack without losing any ground. A special skill? Sandstorm muttered. Although he was similarly surprised that Gentle Snow stopped his attack, he quickly realized the reason why she was able to do so. I don't know what skill you used to stop my attack, but since it is a skill and not a combat technique, you'll only be able to stop me once. I refuse to believe you can continue stopping me. After saying so, Sandstorm readied himself to launch another attack. However, as if Gentle Snow had long anticipated this, she intercepted him, executing 4 attacks with her great sword. Will of Light. 4 extreme slashes. Boom, 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 boom. Sandstorm quickly responded to Gentle Snow's intervention, rapidly brandishing his short sword to defend against the 4 slashes. Every attack he blocked sent him stumbling 1 step back. Are you done using your skill yet? Although Sandstorm was forced to retreat by 4 steps, he still maintained a calm expression. He then smirked and said, "If you're done, it's my turn now." However, just as Sandstorm finished speaking, Gentle Snow raised Glorious Will above her head. At the same time, her body started releasing a sacred glow that suppressed even the space around her. Disappear! Gentle Snow shouted as she swung Glorious Will down at Sandstorm. A boundless light devoured Sandstorm. Myth of Light. With just 1 attack, Gentle Snow obliterated everything before her within 100 yards. Even space itself shattered. As for Sandstorm, he went flying over 100 yards away, his HP falling below 50% and his body covered in injuries. When he hit the ground, the impact created a huge crater. Upon seeing this scene, everyone present was astonished. Violet Swords and Mythology's members, in particular, could not help gaping in shock. Just how many cards does Zero Wing have hidden? Crimson Star wondered aloud as she stared at Gentle Snow. First, it was Chiffon. Now, it was Gentle Snow. Gentle Snow was clearly only at the Void Realm standard. In terms of basic attributes, she had to be quite inferior to Sandstorm. Moreover, Sandstorm had also fully unlocked his mana body already. The only advantage she had was her level of 118. No matter how Crimson Star looked at it, Gentle Snow shouldn't be a match for Sandstorm. In the end, however, Gentle Snow had used only a few moves to topple Sandstorm. The power of her final attack, in particular, practically rivaled that of the attack Shifeng used to deal with the two region chiefs. Feather, what should we do? Sandstorm is already heavily injured. There's still Sinful Flame on Azure's side. With just the four of us, I'm afraid we'll have difficulty accomplishing anything, the Tier 3 Elementalist standing beside White Feather asked when he saw Sandstorm struggling even to stand up right now. With the situation as it was, they wouldn't gain anything from continuing this fight. Out of the 5 team leaders taking part in this operation, Sandstorm was the strongest while White Feather came second. Now that Sandstorm was heavily injured and occupied in battle, it was up to White Feather to take charge. We retreat. Zero Wing's strength exceeds our expectations. We need to report this matter to the Vice Commander as soon as possible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But what about the fire barrier? The Tier 3 Elementalist asked as he looked at the barrier of flames surrounding them. If I use my trump card, I should be able to shatter it. Once it's gone, have everyone retreat at full speed. White Feather instructed. All right. I'll have them scatter and run, the Tier 3 Elementalist said, nodding. Following which, White Feather shattered Zhao Yueru's barrier of flames with a single move. She and Mythology's other members then scattered and fled. As for Zero Wing's members, they persistently hunted down Mythology's members. In the end, they killed not only 20+ of Mythology's peak experts but also Sandstorm and 2 other team leaders, inflicting severe losses on Mythology's Silver Light Legion. Word of this battle also quickly spread throughout Violet Light City, shaking all those who heard it. Chapter 2634, Fame Spreads Across the Western Continent. Chapter 2634, Fame Spreads Across the Western Continent. The Silver Light Legion was Mythology's strongest trump card legion. It might not have many members, but every member had astonishing combat power. Moreover, the peak experts of the Legion all possessed the assistance of a battle array. All this time, the Silver Light Legion had been in existence the various superpowers dreaded. Meanwhile, although Violet Light City was a guild city jointly established by Violet Sword and Mythology, as many superpowers were partners with these superguilds, there were plenty of members of other superpowers present in the city. Word of Sandstorm's team suffering a tragic defeat triggered heated debates among the various superpowers members resting within Violet Light City. Some could not help doubting the validity of this information. In their opinion, Mythology's Silver Light Legion was basically an invincible existence. At this stage of the game, no matter how strong a team of players became, it would, at best, be the Silver Light Legion's equal. The utter rout bruited about was definitely impossible for the Silver Light Legion. How could a pseudo-superpower like Zero Wing have a team capable of defeating the Silver Light Legion? While the various superpowers operating in Violet Light City were looking into this matter, White Feather and the other survivors of Sandstorm's team were currently standing inside a meeting room in Mythology's residence and reporting about it to the white-haired youth before them. White Feather and the others gazed at this white-haired youth with reverence in their eyes. This was because this white-haired youth was none other than the Silver Light Legion's vice commander, Prosciutto, nicknamed the Silver Ghost. You're saying Zero Wing has over 100 members with fully unlocked mana bodies? The Silver Ghost asked calmly as he looked at White Feather. MHM. In addition, according to our investigations, before Azure's Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian underwent Zero Wing's special training, both of them were still quite some distance away from fully unlocking their mana bodies. Now, however, both of them have already done so, and they now rival Crimson Star and Wildfighter in combat power, White Feather replied seriously while nodding. It seems Zero Wing has quite a lot of secrets, Prosciutto commented as he entered deep thought. Vice Commander, they activated the teleportation gate not long ago. Why don't I organize another team and wait for them to come out? Previously, we lost mainly because we were outnumbered. If we have more people in the team, Zero Wing won't have much of an advantage over us, Whitefeather suggested. Now that news of the Silverlight Legion's defeat had spread, they would definitely become a laughingstock among the superpowers if they could not take care of Zero Wing in short order. That won't be necessary, Prosciutto said. Chuckling, he continued, since Zero Wing wants to become famous, we'll fulfill their wish. Notify the ones below and have them publicize this information. I believe plenty of superpowers and major corporations will be interested in Zero Wing's secret for unlocking the mana body. Vice Commander, although the other superpowers will definitely be interested in this secret, if we don't make a move ourselves, I'm afraid no superpower will be willing to take action against Zero Wing. In the end, everyone will simply sit back and watch Zero Wing develop, Whitefeather said worriedly. Relax. Soon, we'll be done with the task the demon god assigned us. At that time, the kingdoms and empires on the continent will no longer serve as a protective shield for the various powers. Meanwhile, with how much resources Zero Wing is occupying, it will become the common target of the superpowers. We won't need to make a move at all, Prosciutto said, smiling. That quest is almost complete. Whitefeather's eyes glowed with excitement when she heard Prosciutto's words. There were 2 crucial quests available in the demon god's shrine, and the completion of either of them could kick up a storm throughout the Western continent. Mythology had chosen to challenge one of those quests. Originally, though, she thought that they would need a lot more time to complete it. If they really completed that quest, then even if Zero Wing cleared the ancient secret land's hero trial, it would be meaningless. The only outcome awaiting Zero Wing would be destruction. All right. Go make the necessary preparations to publicize Zero Wing's information. Also, send someone to the Eastern Continent to notify Vice Guild leader Cold Shadow about the quest's progress. She should know how to deal with Zero Wing, Prosciutto commanded. Understood. Whitefeather replied before leaving the meeting room. News of Zero Wing having over 100 experts with fully unlocked mana bodies spread across the entire Western Continent, instantly garnering great fame for Zero Wing. At the same time, though, the Western continent's powers also grew jealous of Zero Wing and started coveting its secrets. The guild immediately became the focal point of the Western continent as the various powers began investigating it. As Zero Wing's fame was spreading across the Western continent, Crimson Star was leading Shafong and the others into the hero trial. After everyone walked through the teleportation gate and arrived inside the trial grounds, they immediately fell silent. An indescribably solemn expression also appeared on their faces. The reason for this was the intense gravity in the trial grounds. The moment they entered, it felt as if several hundred kilograms had been added to their bodies. Now, let alone fighting, even walking normally was a challenge. In addition, the tunnel they were currently standing in was incomparably dark, which hampered their vision greatly. In fact, aside from their sense of sight, the rest of their 5 senses were also significantly blunted. Now, they felt as if the standard of their 5 senses wasn't even on par with the 5 senses of Tier 1 players. The worst part of it all was the tens of thousands of humanoid monsters ahead of them. Aside from being fully geared in armor, these humanoid monsters also held longswords and carried longbows on their backs. Looking at this scene, everyone could not help feeling that they had just entered an ancient battlefield. Trial Warrior, Dark Creature, Great Lord, Level 120 HP 100 000 000 100 000 000, Trial Elite, Dark Creature, Grand Lord, Level 121 HP 430 000 000 430, 000 However, before everyone could digest the information before them, the sound of system notifications entered their ears. System. You have discovered the hero trial space. System. Hero trial activated. You have 5 natural days to complete the trial. You will be awarded based on the trial's completion rate. 5 days. How can we possibly get through so many monsters in just 5 days? Floating Light suspected that the system was toying with them when he stared at the endless trial warriors and trial elites before him. The monsters in this trial space were ordinary monsters, which normally wouldn't pose much of a threat to the experts on their team. However, that was in the outside world. Inside the trial space, their physical bodies and 5 senses were heavily suppressed. Even a domain realm expert like himself could barely exhibit 30% of his normal combat power under such a suppression. At this moment, he would have great trouble fighting the trial warriors in a one-on-one situation, let alone the trial elites. Meanwhile, there was only one path in this trial space, so there was no way they could avoid the trial warriors and trial elites entirely. The only way to get to the trial boss was to kill these monsters and gradually carve out a path. Meanwhile, when Crimson Star and Wildfighter, who had started growing optimistic of success after witnessing Zero Wing's strength, saw this scene, they were likewise stunned. Not only are the monsters here numerous, but they are also positioned very close together. Even if we lure just one of them, I'm afraid we'll end up luring several thousand. In addition, all of these monsters are capable of ranged attacks. Let alone fighting, even dodging their attacks would be a problem. Wildfighter frowned at the trial warriors and trial elites that filled the tunnel before him. Although he had long known that the hero trial would be difficult, he never thought that it would be this difficult. With their bodies so heavily suppressed, if they tried fighting several thousand of these monsters simultaneously, they would definitely be honeycombed in no time. Look closer, the weapons of those monsters are enchanted with the penetrating effect. Not to mention other melee players, even MTS won't be able to tank more than a handful of those monsters. The slightest mistake would mean death. Although I have some spells that can stop a portion of the ranged attacks, there are simply too many monsters. The help I can provide will be negligible, Crimson Star said, a bitter smile forming on her face as she pointed at the trial elite's weapons. Our only option is to have our ranged players kite the monsters and whittle away their numbers. However, if we do that, killing all these monsters in just 5 days will be utterly impossible. Upon hearing Crimson Star's words, Duan Hanshan and the other experts from the Azure Chamber of Commerce also nodded in agreement. Any melee expert that hadn't reached the Void Realm would get slaughtered if they tried going up against more than a handful of these trial monsters by themselves. However, their team simply had too few peak experts. They couldn't form a front line capable of effectively holding off the trial monsters. Their only option was to have the ranged players kite the monsters and have the melee players repel any monsters that got too close for comfort. However, while this strategy was very safe, the efficiency was abysmal. Vice Commander Crimson, you say can block a portion of the ranged attacks? Shifeng asked after giving the matter some thought. Yes. I can block roughly 20% to 30% of the ranged attacks. However, there are simply too many monsters here. Against the attacks of several thousand monsters, even if I manage to block 30%, it will do little to no good for those dodging the attacks, Crimson Star said, nodding. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. If you can block that much, then there shouldn't be any problem, Shifeng said after making some mental calculations. Afterward, my side will stand at the front and attract the monsters' attacks. Everyone else just has to attack with everything you've got. We should be able to get to the trial boss within the stipulated time. You'll attract the attacks. Crimson Star was stunned by Shifeng's words. She simply couldn't understand why Shifeng didn't consider this a problem. These were the simultaneous attacks of several thousand monsters they were talking about. Moreover, some of these monsters even had weapons with enhanced penetrative effects. Not to mention, in this horrible environment, even peak experts would have difficulty evading the attacks of the trial monsters, let alone Zero Wings members, who were mainly at the refinement realm standard. However, before Crimson Star and the others could react to Shifeng's proposal, the swordsman had already commanded Zero Wings 100+ experts to take action. And these Zero Wing members immediately charged at the nearby trial warriors and trial elites without the slightest bit of hesitation. Chapter 2635, A Stroll Through the Backyard? Chapter 2635, A Stroll Through the Backyard? Upon seeing Zero Wings members dash straight toward the nearest group of trial monsters, Violet Swords and Azure's members gaped in shock. They were going up against several thousand monsters here. Moreover, even the weakest of these monsters was a level 120 Great Lord, yet Shifeng didn't even bother to discuss positioning and individual assignments before having Zero Wings members charge straight into battle. This was the first time Violet Swords and Azure's members had seen such leadership. To make matters worse, every one of Zero Wing's members actually obeyed Shifeng's command. This is just too reckless. Wildfighter could not help feeling anxious when he saw Shifeng proceeding with utter disregard for their opinions. There are several thousand monsters. Even if they have fully unlocked mana bodies and can take some hits, if they can't dodge attacks, they'll still end up dead. He admitted that Zero Wing's members were very high-leveled. In addition, every one of them also had a fully unlocked mana body. Zero Wing's members definitely had a greater advantage when going up against the trial monsters than Violet Sword's peak experts did. However, the system was clearly trying to test players' combat standards in this tunnel. Levels and fully unlocked mana bodies were only secondary. Currently, they were already tight for time because the trial duration was only 5 days instead of the expected 7 days. If they died here and lost a day's worth of progress, they definitely wouldn't be able to complete the trial. We have no choice but to go along with them, Crimson Star sighed when she saw Zero Wing's members getting close to the nearest group of trial monsters. I'll activate my magic array in a moment. Everyone else, focus fire on the trial elites. So long as we reduce the number of penetrating attacks we have to deal with, we can stop the remaining trial monsters much more easily. Sinful Flame and the other members of Azure nodded in agreement with Crimson Star's plan before charging toward the nearest trial elite. They intended to get rid of a few trial elites as soon as the battle between both sides started, so that they could lessen the pressure on Zero Wing's members and minimize casualties. The instant Zero Wing's members entered the trial monsters' perception range, the trial warriors and trial elites promptly sprang into action like veterans of the battlefield. In no time at all, 400 trial warriors spread out into a square formation around the main army. They then stabbed the iron shields they carried into the ground, creating an iron wall that protected the several thousand other trial monsters within their formation. As for the trial monsters inside the square formation, they unslung their bows, split up into several divisions, and fired arrows at Zero Wing's members in intervals. This scene stunned Violet Swords and Azure's members momentarily. They had seen monsters attacking as an orderly group before, but this was definitely their first time seeing monsters attacking in such a well-trained fashion. In fact, the coordination of these trial monsters rivaled that of NPCs. Volleys of arrows rained down on Zero Wing's members, each volley consisting of more than 1,000 arrows. Moreover, the intervals between the volleys were incredibly short. The arrows in each volley were also well spaced, leaving no room for Zero Wing's members to exploit. It's over. Even peak experts will have difficulty dodging and blocking all those arrows. With the combat standards of Zero Wing's members, several volleys would be enough to annihilate them. Wildfighter's complexion darkened significantly when he saw the spate of arrows bombarding Zero Wing's members. Against such a coordinated and accurate assault, let alone Zero Wing's members, even a group of peak experts wouldn't survive for very long. Although the attack pattern was very monotonous, the arrows flew incredibly fast. In addition, they came in torrents. There was a limit to the number of actions and reactions a person could make within a certain period. Over this limit, even domain realm experts would be rendered powerless and could only watch as they got killed. Although these arrows didn't carry a lot of power, they still weren't attacks players like themselves could afford to receive casually. At this moment, every one of Zero Wing's members would have to go up against at least 10 arrows simultaneously, with some unlucky ones having to go up against as many as 20. After factoring in the speed of the arrows, these numbers had already exceeded the limits of even Tier 3 peak experts. Only domain realm experts would be able to accurately determine the trajectories of these arrows and react to them in time. Just when the first volley of arrows was about to land on Zero Wing's members, a voice appeared in the team chat. Vice Commander Crimson, activate your defensive magic array. Shifeng ordered unhurriedly as he looked at the descending arrows. Got it. Upon hearing Shifeng's command, Crimson Star snapped out of her daze and waved her staff, completing the activation of the magic array she had prepared beforehand. A silver barrier bloomed from the center of Zero Wing's formation, instantly expanding to cover a 200-yard radius and enveloping all of Zero Wing's members within it. Tier 3 Curse, Aerial Defense. Aerial Defense was a curse that had a certain probability of invalidating the flying tools within its range, it was similarly effective against arrows. In the next moment, more than 20% of the first arrow volley clattered to the ground. Now, only about 900 arrows continued flying toward Zero Wings members. Even so, Violet Swords and Azure's members still wore grim expressions on their faces. Although the number of arrows had been reduced to around 900, the number of attacks each of Zero Wings members had to face still exceeded the limit of peak experts, let alone refinement realm experts. As Violet Swords and Azure's members were shaking their heads and sighing, Zero Wings members started maneuvering around the arrows, dodging them effortlessly as if they had long since known the trajectories of these arrows. From afar, it seemed as if Zero Wings members were dancing in a rain of arrows. When the first volley of arrows ended, not a single Zero Wing member had suffered a direct hit. While some Zero Wing members had lost roughly a quarter of their HP, that was merely a result of them defending against the Trial Elite's penetrating arrows. The HP they lost was also instantly replenished by the healers on the team. How is that possible? Floating Light's eyes bulged when he saw this scene. Against that volley of arrows, even he wouldn't have such an easy time blocking and defending. However, Zero Wings members had dealt with the volley of arrows as if they were just strolling through their backyard. At this moment, let alone Floating Light, even Solitary Frost and Yang Xiaoqian, who had trained with Zero Wings members for the past few days, were astonished by this scene. Despite the majority of Zero Wings members being only at the refinement realm, they had easily dealt with an attack that even peak experts would find troublesome. This was simply unbelievable. They can actually block and dodge that kind of attack so easily. Just what kind of training do they normally undergo? Yang Xiaoqian's heart roiled with confusion as she looked at Zero Wings refinement realm experts. What Yang Xiaoqian and the others did not know was that Zero Wings core members had long since familiarized themselves with attacks like the Trial Monster's arrow attacks. After all, they faced much worse when they were training at the Extraordinary Tower's first floor. In fact, in the opinions of Zero Wings members, blocking and dodging the Trial Monster's arrow attacks would still be a cakewalk even without Crimson Star's support. After enduring several volleys of arrows, Shifeng noticed that all of the agitated Trial Monsters had shifted their attention to Zero Wings members. He then ordered through the team chat, "We've stabilized the aggro. Everyone, start attacking." Upon hearing Shifeng's command, Violet Swords and Azure's members snapped out of their daze and started launching attacks at the Trial Monsters, together with Zero Wings members. Because Zero Wings members were holding aggro, everyone else could attack freely without having to worry about getting attacked themselves. As a result, the Trial Monsters fell rapidly, one after another. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Meanwhile, everyone discovered that these Trial Monsters granted a surprisingly large amount of EXP, basically 3 times higher than normal. At this discovery, Violet Swords and Azure's members grew ecstatic. The only disappointing thing about these Trial Monsters was that they did not drop any loot. After the team grinded the Trial Monsters for more than half a day, something strange occurred. One of the Trial Elites killed suddenly burst into flames and transformed into a dilapidated, crystal stele that hovered quietly in the air. The stele radiated frightening mana fluctuations that sent many of the Tier 3 experts present stumbling back. An ancient legacy stele? When Shifeng saw this worn stele, his eyes widened in shock, and he could not help wondering whether he was hallucinating. Chapter 2636, Beginning of Chaos. Chapter 2636, Beginning of Chaos. Shifeng aside, the sudden appearance of the crystal stele surprised everyone else present and piqued their curiosity. They never thought that the Trial Monsters, which had not dropped a single item until now, would actually drop a stele. What an amazing stele! It's causing the ambient mana density to skyrocket just by hovering there. Even the surrounding space has become heavier, Crimson Star exclaimed when she registered the changes the crystal stele brought to its environs. If a Tier 2 player were here, they wouldn't even be able to approach it. In regard to this situation, though, Violet Swords members could not help a little disappointment. Even a fool could tell that the crystal stele was extraordinary. However, according to the agreement between Zero Wing and Violet Sword, aside from the trial boss's loot, every other discovery made and loot found in the trial would belong to Zero Wing. Hence, They could only look at the stele. What is this stele? Not only can it not be appraised, but you can't even touch it. It's as if this stele doesn't exist in this space, Aqua Rose said with a gloomy expression on her face as she stood before the stele. Could it be a holographic projection? This crystal stele was incredibly precious. Even if they couldn't appraise it and discover its uses, they could still set it up inside a room to increase the room's mana density. This room could then be used as a training facility for players. However, if this treasure was merely a hologram, then it can't even serve as a decoration. This isn't a hologram. It's just that we can't touch it, Shifeng said, smiling. Guild leader, you're still in the mood for jokes. If we can't touch it, then we can only look at this stele and nothing more, Aqua Rose said anxiously when she saw Shifeng's nonchalant attitude toward this situation. In God's domain, the prerequisite for players to store an item in their bag space was for them to come into physical contact with the target item. If they couldn't touch the stele, how were they supposed to take it away? Looking at it is indeed our only option, Shifeng said, nodding while smiling. This stele isn't an item that can be taken away. The only thing we can take away is the information recorded on it. The existence of ancient legacy steles was still foreign to the current players of God's domain because these steles appeared only in ancient ruins or secret lands. In the past, the discovery of an ancient legacy stele would always trigger a storm of bloodshed. This was because ancient legacy steles recorded the lost technology of ancient civilization. Any guild that managed to get their hands on this technology could undergo a qualitative transformation. In Shifeng's previous life, a total of 5 ancient legacy steles had appeared in God's domain. During the 10 years God's domain had been in operation, only 5 ancient legacy steles had appeared. One could easily imagine the value of those steles. This was also the reason why Shifeng was so excited to see the ancient legacy stele appear in the hero trial. Take away the information recorded. Aqua Rose was confused by Shifeng's words. No matter how she looked at the stele, she simply couldn't imagine how he was going to take away the information on it. Currently, they couldn't touch the stele at all. And even after using the master-ranked appraisal, she still couldn't extract any information from the stele. Just how were they supposed to take the recorded information? You can't extract the information recorded on the stele using normal methods. Not only is the information recorded massive, but it is also extremely complex. If you wish to extract the recorded information, you have to record the magic arrays carved on the stele, Shifeng explained. Record the magic arrays on it. Aqua Rose gaped in shock as she looked at the worn stele. There were roughly 40 magic arrays engraved on the crystal stele, and even the simplest one was an advanced magic array. Recording them all was simply a joke. They could spend only 5 days inside the trial space. Meanwhile, it took around half a day to learn one advanced magic array. What more magic arrays above the advanced rank? Relax. This task might be difficult for others, but it isn't particularly difficult for me. All I need is some time, Shifeng said confidently. During this period, you'll lead the team and continue taking care of the trial monsters. Learning the magic arrays recorded on the ancient legacy stele would indeed be arduous for an advanced magician. However, he had long been an intermediate master magician. 2 or 3 days would be more than enough for him to learn and record these magic arrays. I understand. Aqua Rose nodded before taking charge of the team to continue clearing out the trial monsters in their way. As for Shifeng, he sat quietly before the ancient legacy stele, confusing Violet Sword's members. However, they did not put too much thought into the matter. After all, the stele belonged to Zero Wing. How Zero Wing dealt with it was up to the guild's discretion. Meanwhile, Shifeng started analyzing the layers of magic arrays engraved on the stele. Learning a magic array was considerably easier than decoding one. The troublesome part was having to memorize a lot of things. However, Shifeng's brain capacity now surpassed that of ordinary people. Learning and recording the magic arrays was a piece of cake for him. In less than an hour, Shifeng had already memorized one advanced magic array and started on the second one. In the meantime, Aqua Rose and the others kept clearing out trial monsters and advancing down the tunnel. However, the deeper into the tunnel they went, the more densely packed the trial monsters became. Eventually, the number of monsters the team faced each time had grown so high that even Zero Wings members started feeling taxed. As a result, the team's speed of advance slowed. Fortunately, fighting inside this trial ground was akin to taking part in an intense training session. Everyone's combat standard increased as they fought the trial monsters. Moreover, the EXP everyone obtained was incredibly generous. In just 2 short days, everyone had gained a little more than a level. Aqua Rose and the other members of Zero Wing had already reached level 119, whereas Violet Swords and Azure's members were now at level 114. Crimson Star and Wildfighter were just 30% away from level 115. The leveling speed here astonished Crimson Star and the others. As everyone's motivation was increasing, a series of system announcements suddenly entered their ears. God's Domain System Announcement. Some players have triggered the new expansion pack Demon Gods Chaos. God's Domain System Announcement. The new expansion pack Demon Gods Chaos will activate in one natural day. At that time, all non-NPC towns and cities will no longer receive the protection of NPC kingdoms and empires. Everyone inside the trial space gasped when they heard the system announcement. On the surface, this new expansion pack might not seem like it would affect players in any way, but everyone present understood that it would usher in a new era in God's domain. Currently, aside from level 100+ maps, all guild towns and cities established in maps below level 100 came under the aegis of NPC kingdoms and empires. If these guild towns and cities suddenly lost this protection, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, most guild towns and guild cities relied on the NPCs they employed from the various NPC kingdoms and empires to maintain security. Without this layer of security, players could take action inside guild towns and cities much more freely. The chaos that would befall the various guild towns and cities at that time would go without saying. Aside from maintaining security, defending against siege attacks would also become much more difficult. In other words, the activation of the Demon Gods Chaos expansion pack would thoroughly change the structure of God's domain. Without the threat of NPCs, many powers would most likely make a move against their rivals. Outside the ancient secret land, chaos had already ensued. Good. Wonderful. Let's see how those local powers are going to continue protecting their resource spots without those troublesome NPC guard. I don't know who activated this expansion pack, but those people have really given us dark powers a shot in the arm. Now that those NPCs are gone, no one can stop us now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The powers that were secretly developing themselves in the various kingdoms and empires started growing excited and restless. As for the superpowers, they promptly held meetings to draft countermeasures for the expansion pack's activation. Meanwhile, as the entire God's domain was in chaos, Shifeng slowly stood up from in front of the ancient legacy stele inside the ancient secret land. Finally, success. Shifeng smiled when he saw the stele before him gradually fading out of existence. He then started drawing the magic arrays he memorized, which released a frightening aura that shook even the surrounding space. Chapter 2637. Astonishing Memory Crystal. Chapter 2637. Astonishing Memory Crystal. The commotion caused by the ancient legacy stele was huge. Even Crimson Star and the others, who were resting over 3,000 yards away, sensed the unusual mana fluctuation from the stele. Did something happen over there? This mana fluctuation rivals what Tier 5 NPCs cause when using Tier 5 spells, Crimson Star exclaimed as she turned toward the mana fluctuation's origin, horror coloring her eyes. Isn't that guild leader Black Flame's current location? Did something happen to him? Wildfighter similarly revealed a serious expression on his face when he felt the intense mana fluctuation. Tier 5 NPCs were existences that stood at the apex of God's domain. The Tier 5 spells used by these NPCs could wreak great devastation. Before such spells, Tier 3 players like themselves wouldn't even be able to put up the slightest bit of resistance. Everyone present would be instantly killed. Meanwhile, all sorts of dangers filled this trial space. The trial monsters weren't the only threat here. There were also plenty of traps and dangerous events that occurred at random. An ambush by a Tier 5 spell was well within the range of possibilities. If something really happened to Shifeng, then it would deal a huge blow to the entire team. After all, their team revolved around Shifeng. Even though the experts on the team understood that Aqua Rose was the person leading them all this time, if he disappeared, many of those experts would most likely question her leadership. In this situation, Aqua Rose had to contact Shifeng immediately. "Guild leader, is everything all right on your side?" Aqua Rose asked worriedly. Currently, nobody was more anxious than she was about this sudden mana fluctuation. She knew that Shifeng was under the demon god's curse, which tripled his death penalty. Meanwhile, players inside the trial space could only wait to get automatically resurrected. Hence, if an ordinary player needed 1 day to get automatically resurrected, then Shifeng would need 3 days. If he died right now, then their odds of clearing the hero trial would become even slimmer. "Relax, everything's fine. I just unlocked the information recorded on the stele," Shifeng said, smiling when he saw the anxious look on Aqua Rose's face. Unlocking the information actually caused such a huge commotion. Aqua Rose was stunned when she heard Shifeng's words. This was definitely the strongest mana fluctuation she had experienced in God's domain. If this mana fluctuation were due to a spell, she wouldn't be surprised if it destroyed an entire NPC city. However, Shifeng was telling her that this frightening mana fluctuation was merely a consequence of unlocking the recorded information on the stele. This was simply unbelievable. This is information left behind by an ancient god. It is naturally extraordinary. However, I still need some time to complete the unlocking process. For now, continue clearing the trial monsters on your side. I'll meet up with you once I'm done, Shifeng explained and chuckled. In reality, the mana fluctuation had surprised even Shifeng. From what he knew about ancient legacy steles, the strength of the mana fluctuation when the recorded information was unlocked was an indicator of the recorded information's value. Generally, though, the mana fluctuations that occurred extended only 1 or 2,000 yards. Now, however, the mana fluctuation from this ancient legacy stele reached Aqua Rose's location, roughly 3,000 yards away. It rivaled the ancient legacy stele found in the ancient god's tomb, a level 150+ ancient secret land. However, the ancient god's tomb's minimum entry requirement was tier 4. "Alright, I'll notify the others," Aqua Rose answered. After giving the matter some thought, she found Shifeng's words reasonable. Since the information recorded on the stele was something left behind by an ancient god, it naturally wouldn't be something ordinary. She then turned to the rest of the team and said, "Everyone, please rest assured. Nothing has happened to the guild leader." The guild leader said that this mana fluctuation is merely a consequence of him unlocking the information recorded on the stele. He says that he is not in any danger and that we should continue clearing out the remaining trial monsters. He will rejoin us shortly. Aqua Rose's words kindled a sense of admiration toward Shifeng in everyone in the team. They hadn't thought that Shifeng would actually be able to obtain something from the stele. After a brief discussion, they promptly resumed clearing out the trial monsters in their path. In the meantime, Shifeng was staring intently at the gradually forming crystal hovering before him. When extracting information from ancient legacy steles, once players successfully learned the magic arrays recorded on a stele and drew them, the drawn magic arrays would gather mana from the surroundings to create a memory crystal. This was one of the more common methods ancient gods used to pass down their legacies. After all, compared to books, memory crystals were much better at withstanding the ravages of time. So long as the memory crystal was intact, there wouldn't be any need to worry about parts of the information getting lost. 3 hours. 6 hours. 9 hours. After the magic arrays gathered mana for 15 consecutive hours, a memory crystal the size of 4 adult fists took shape before Shifeng. This memory crystal was at least triple the size of ordinary memory crystals. Amazing. Just what is recorded in it? Shifeng gazed at the memory crystal before him in astonishment. The memory crystals that Eliade had given him already contained a ton of information. If not for his brain capacity being sufficiently high, he would have lost consciousness when accepting all that information. The memory crystal before him, however, was 3 times larger than the ones the Heavenly Blue Saint had given him. The amount of information contained within this unusually large memory crystal was definitely several dozen times more. Shifeng could not even begin to imagine what kind of information awaited him. After observing the memory crystal for a brief moment, Shifeng then tapped his finger on it to access its recorded information. He was really eager to find out what it contained. However, as soon as he did so, he was stunned. System: this memory crystal is extremely unstable and can remain in existence for only 2 natural days before disappearing. System: warning. You have discovered a large memory crystal. Because of insufficient concentration, you are unable to read the information completely. If you persist in reading the information, there is a very large chance you will enter a deep coma. Do you still wish to read the information? I can't read it even as a Tier 3 player. The system notifications took Shifeng aback. Just what is recorded inside? This was definitely the first time he had come across such a situation. In fact, he had never heard of something like this happening before. It seems I toiled for nothing. Sure enough, the information recorded on an ancient legacy stele really isn't easy to obtain. Shifeng smiled bitterly as he looked at the memory crystal in his hands. Having insufficient concentration wasn't a problem that could be solved quickly. Items capable of raising one's concentration were extremely rare in God's domain. The concentration he could receive from raising his levels and improving his equipment was also negligible at best. If he couldn't process the recorded information with the concentration of a Tier 3 player, then he would have to wait until he had completed his Tier 4 promotion. As for forcefully trying to read the recorded information, this was absolutely out of the question. Ostensibly, there was only a very large chance for him to enter a deep coma. In reality, if he did try to read the information, then he was guaranteed to fall into a coma. The time he would lose from being in a coma was one thing. What he truly feared was the irreparable brain damage. If that happened, he would have a much more difficult time with future tier promotions, something he definitely didn't want. Even if the information recorded in this memory crystal was incredibly valuable, he still wouldn't trade his future for it. After all, compared to the information left behind by an ancient god, reaching Tier 5 and Tier 6 was much more important. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Wait. There's another method I can use to read this memory crystal. Just as Shifeng was about to store the memory crystal, he received a sudden inspiration. Divine Will. If I can polish myself using the Tier 4 Divine Will, I can push my concentration from the peak of Tier 3 to the Tier 4 standard. So long as my concentration reaches the Tier 4 standard, I shouldn't have any problems reading the information recorded in this. The more Shifeng thought about it, the more he found his plan to be feasible. Anyone else would still have difficulties pushing their concentration to the Tier 4 standard within 2 short days, even if they could train themselves using the Tier 4 Divine Will. However, it was a different story for him. Thanks to his advanced bloodline, his concentration standard had long since reached the peak of Tier 3, just a step shy of the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, he was very familiar with training using the Divine Will. Given one day, he had an excellent chance of pushing his concentration to the Tier 4 standard. No sooner had Shifeng stored the memory crystal than Aqua Rose called him and announced, "Guild leader, we discovered the trial boss. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.